Hello, everyone. Welcome to Science Systems and Applications Incorporated, also known by our acronym SSAI's live podcast episode. I am your host, Jason Dietrich from the SSAI Communications Department. As we always say at SSAI, the future is grand, and we want to share with you what we are doing to ensure that happens. I just wanted to thank you all so much for listening in to our conversation today. If you are curious about what we've been up to, please make sure that you follow us on each of our social media platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, and our YouTube channel. Please also check out our website. We have job openings in a variety of different fields, and if you are passionate about science, exploration, and humankind, SSAI is the place for you. All the links for each of our social media handles will be provided right down below in the description of this video. Please check each of these links out, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, and engage with us via your questions about what SSAI is currently doing. All our managers, scientists, engineers, educators, and technicians are an important part of the SSAI community of rock stars. They are doing amazing work and contributing to many different initiatives, like at NASA, among many others, to help benefit humankind. Speaking of scientists, we have one rock star guest who is joining me today. We have Dr. Libby Larson, who is a senior support scientist who works at the NASA Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems Office. Libby, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk with me today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Really glad to be here.
Awesome. Well, I am so thrilled to be doing this podcast episode with you. And as I'm sure you can definitely agree, as we always say, it's a great day at SSAI, right?
That's right.
So, Libby, I have a couple questions that I wanted to ask you in relation to your work and your experiences at SSAI. My very first question that I wanted to ask you was, can you please tell the audience about yourself and state your role associated with SSAI and your work with the NASA Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems Office?
Sure thing. So I have been working at SSAI for almost 10 years now. And before that, the way I started being associated with NASA was I was a what was called a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. So the American Association for the Advancement of Science takes scientists from a range of different disciplines and places them at federal agencies to bring their scientific expertise to the policy arena and to learn about policy and both science for policy and policy for science. So I did a couple of years at headquarters in that fellowship. And then when that finished, I was then hired at the Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems Office at Goddard, which is kind of a unique office in that we are not doing research ourselves, but we are supporting research scientists that are funded by NASA headquarters in the Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems focus area. And so currently for my work, there are sort of three main priorities that I have. One, which I know we're going to talk about next, is that our office is the support office for the Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, or above, which is a team of many individual scientists and research teams who have been funded by the Terrestrial Ecology Program at headquarters to do research on environment and climate change in Alaska and Northwest Canada. And that is a roughly 10-year campaign that we're nearing the end of. And so I help support the science team, help them have interdisciplinary interactions and engage with local communities, etc. Another main part of my job is that I help represent NASA in the U.S. Global Change Research Program, or GCRP, which is under the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House. And GCRP is charged with coordinating all of the federal agencies that do climate change research. And so that is a really great opportunity to be able to collaborate with and meet with my colleagues at other agencies and work together to address the research needs to figure out what to do about climate change. And then the other big thing that I do is that I'm the coordinator for the North American Carbon Program, which is a community of practice of researchers studying carbon cycle in North America, and regardless of whatever their funding source is, so not just NASA, but really from any institution. And they are just a really great group of people to work with in terms of being able to collaborate beyond those sometimes institutional barriers that exist. So I have quite a varied job, but it keeps me happy to have so many diverse things going on. And yes, it's a great place to be.
Wow, that is absolutely fantastic, Libby. And yeah, you definitely have a lot of great experience and a lot of wonderful jobs. I'm so glad to hear that you are happy doing them, because that's definitely what's most important. You definitely want to enjoy what you're doing, because then if you're happy about what you're doing, you're able to put in a lot of effort and your passion into it, which is really making a difference. I have to say, I believe it or not, throughout all of my schooling experience, since you mentioned the North American Carbon Group, I've never even heard of that. Just as a side note, how long has that been around?
So that's been around actually for a couple of decades now. And it started off originally as scientists that were funded from a few different U.S. agencies. So primarily NASA and NOAA and Department of Energy and USGS and USDA. And the program managers back in the mid-2000s had collaborated together to say, we're going to fund a bunch of research focused on better understanding the carbon cycle in North America. Since then, that specific funding has not continued, but the scientists who were part of that sort of an initial group have continued to sort of have working sessions together and scientific meetings every few years, and I've helped sort of support some mentoring programs and have a newsletter, and really trying to just help to maintain connections. I think it's really easy, when you're funded by an agency like NASA or NSF or something. It's pretty easy maybe to get to know the other people in your funding cohort or the whatever the program is that specifically funded you, but there's lots of overlap and synergies between the work that NASA funds and the work that NSF funds, or the work that Department of Energy funds, for example. And it's really great to be able to figure out how to make sure that the work that the individual scientists are doing is connected to an even sort of broader realm. And I think that helps advance the science and understanding much more quickly.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more, Libby, in relation to your explanation there. So I really appreciate you explaining more about the North American Carbon Group. That's very fascinating. I'm definitely going to do some more research with that. And then also for you viewers who are listening in to this podcast episode, we'll definitely provide a link for you.
Yes.
In the YouTube description of this video. So please definitely check out that link when you can and explore some of this impactful work that is going on there. So Libby, thank you so much for your answer, sharing about your role at SSAI, and especially with your work with the NASA Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems Office. And then I actually just noticed this now as an additional side note, with your last name being Larson. I actually knew a professor in undergrad. I graduated from undergrad in 2019, and he was a doctor as well, and his name was Dr. Eric Larson, and he's a geologist and also does work with meteorology. So I don't know if there's a relation by chance. I was just curious.
No, it turns out I am actually not related to very many Larsons. My great-grandfather, he was Finnish and his last name was Pikkarainen. And when he emigrated to the U.S., he moved to a predominantly Swedish area, and so to fit in better, he changed his last name to Larson. So, um, so not many that I'm related to.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very interesting to hear. Like I said, I was just curious about
Sure.
that. So, well, that's awesome. So, Libby, I was going to transition into my next question that I wanted to ask you. So you mentioned a little bit about the Arctic and Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, also known as ABOVE for short. And I know that addresses the rapid climate changes in high northern latitudes. Can you share some of the most surprising or impactful findings this field campaign has uncovered about the interactions between social and ecological systems in these regions? And how do these findings influence both local communities and even broader environmental policies?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's really amazing about Above, as I mentioned, it's a 10-year campaign that we're sort of nearing the end of. And so over the course of those 10 years, there have been many different project teams that have been funded to look at a range of different topics that there's so much going on in the region, so that a lot of the things have very immediate local or regional impacts, right? So we've had teams who have been looking at thawing permafrost, which can impact in local infrastructure, and also has impacts on the way that people can move across the land and access their traditional resources for hunting and gathering, for example. And then, of course, many people probably are more familiar with the fact that the region has had a lot more wildfire that has gone on. So we even experienced the impacts of that down here from the Canadian fires that happened last summer. And so those things changing, say, changes to vegetation that impact the way that animals move across the landscape, many of which are subsistence animals for traditional livelihoods in the region as well. So part of what's always been exciting to me is that Above has had, such a variety of different topics that the researchers have been investigating, and many of them have, made some pretty great connections with, say, local communities in thinking about how they are addressing their land management, or sometimes, bigger scale. So if you think about the government of Northwest Territories is a partner that we've worked with, especially to understand the impacts of the really devastating wildfires that they've had. But the other thing I think that is really important, and that NASA, as a remote sensing agency, is able to have an even broader perspective, and to the extent of even thinking about how these changes impact the global carbon cycle and global climate change. And what that means is that those things, the changes that are happening in Arctic and Boreal regions, actually, while they, in addition to having immediate impacts for the people who live there, also impact the rest of us. And a big reason that the NASA headquarters program manager had decided to initiate this focus on trying to understand what was happening in Arctic and Boreal regions was that, especially at the time, permafrost, for example, was not really included at the time in the global change models that people were using to predict future climate change. But permafrost stores a tremendous amount of carbon, and there's still today, despite all the research that we and others have been doing, still a lot of uncertainty about how much of that carbon, as the permafrost warms, will be released to the atmosphere. What is the impact of the fires and the carbon that's released from that to the atmosphere? So really, trying to make advances in improving the models and the predictive capacity that we have to think about how the climate is going to continue to change into the future, and the impacts that will have, not just on the residents of the area, but for all of us globally.
Absolutely, Libby. That's just that's very fascinating in relation to the research that is being done. And I know that you brought up the Canadian wildfires. I remember them happening. Last year it was very unfortunate, and I remember the sky for days was just like a light orange. And the further north you got, the more darker it was. I mean, I remember New York City. It was so bad you couldn't even see the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
It was just so like dark orange, and I know the citizens up there, they were required to wear masks for a couple days just because of how bad it was. And I was getting ready to go down to camp, since I was the camp director for a space adventure camp down in Virginia, and I was thinking, oh boy, hopefully the fires don't impact like us down there, or impact the air quality. So it was all definitely very interesting. But like you said, there's you definitely can get some interesting discoveries with them. But you're right, there is still a lot of uncertainty. We just don't know what's going to happen, or what kind of impacts are going to be made here on planet Earth. So I'm definitely very excited to see the continued research that is going to be done there. So I really appreciate you going into an in-depth analysis about above. So
Sure thing.
and you mentioned it's a great acronym, by the way, above, because like you're looking straight up, right? So,
Right.
so that's a wonderful, easy way for people to know that you're looking up into the sky. So it's fun. So Libby, I wanted to transition into my next question that I wanted to ask you, which was your role involves significant collaboration, and you mentioned this earlier within the U.S. Global Change Research Program, particularly in the Carbon Cycle Science Interagency Working Group, the Social Sciences Coordinating Committee, and the Coast Science and Decision Making Group. Can you discuss a recent project or initiative that exemplifies the importance of integrating human dimensions into ecological research? And how do these interagency efforts shape the way SSAI researchers approach ecological and climate-related challenges?
Yeah. I think this is a very important topic to discuss. As I mentioned, I've been with SSAI now for about 10 years, and have been involved in these interagency groups during that time. And especially, I think, with the Social Sciences Coordinating Committee, the Coast group that you mentioned is a relatively more recent one. But, when I first started working in that interagency space, there was a lot of perspective among many of the natural and physical scientists that the main benefit of social science was to be able to help them communicate their results to the public or to policymakers. And so consequently, social scientists were really kind of brought in at the end of things and asked to sort of help do stuff. And one of the things that we kept sort of pushing was the fact that the various social science disciplines actually have a tremendous amount of research and insight into climate change itself, and humans are both driving and responding to climate change, and there are many different things to understand about how that happens. And if we actually want to address climate change, we need to understand human behavior at a whole bunch of different levels, and whether you're talking about individuals or governments. And so we did a lot of work over time to really try to help everybody understand that the social scientists had a sort of equal value and contribution to be able to help make the science the fullest and most understanding that we could have. And so that work has been ongoing. And what's been especially exciting to me is that, the recent sort of impact that has been able to have is that in the most recent national climate assessment. So the U.S. Global Change Research Program is charged with producing the national climate assessment every 4 years, which is charged by Congress to do this. And so the chapters that are in that, it has, regional chapters. So there will be chapters that describe how climate change is impacting, say, the Northeast or the Southwest. And then there are sectoral chapters that talk about how climate change is impacting, say, agriculture or water resources. And through the work that the SSCC was doing, is that we were able in the most recent National Climate Assessment to get 2 additional chapters added. One was talking about the economics of climate change and the impacts from an economic perspective. And another one that was just more broadly talking about the human dimensions and the ways in which, all of the other sort of social science stuff that's not economics, as I mentioned, humans are both driving climate change and responding to it. And so having a dedicated chapter to that, I feel like felt like a significant accomplishment to be able to, really get both the recognition, but I think it just improves the science to do that much more inter and transdisciplinary collaboration and understanding. And so, an even sort of more fruitful thing. So the most recent National Climate Assessment was released last fall, I believe, and that was NCA 5, so it's the 5th one. They just announced the director of what will be the next National Climate Assessment, Ariella Zeicherman, who is at NOAA. And what's very exciting to me is that she's actually an anthropologist. And so to think 10 years ago, I don't think any of us thought that would have been possible to have an anthropologist sort of leading this effort. And so that's been, really, really exciting. The other thing, as I mentioned, we've done a lot of work in terms of thinking about our understanding of climate change, not just from a physical and natural science perspective, but as humans as part of that. And also then, so that has led into, say, the work of the Coast Science and Decision Making. So really trying to dig in, what are the best ways that science can inform decision making, and that decision making can use the best science. And there's even a science of decision making. So trying to understand how it is that people or groups or governments actually make decisions and do management issues kind of stuff. And then the other part that I think that we've done a lot of work on too is, especially in the current administration, is thinking about issues of equity and justice. And so in the prior National Climate Assessment, there was a group of people who had put together some guidance for authors in terms of thinking about how to incorporate and acknowledge and recognize equity and injustice or justice issues, regardless of whatever chapter the author team was working on. So, sadly, there are issues of injustice no matter where you go. And so we felt that it was really important to help the teams be able to acknowledge that and write about that in the assessment. And that felt like a very powerful and valuable experience. And I think something that could really have only been done from that interagency collaborative perspective.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible, Libby. And you brought up an excellent point in terms of some of the issues that we have. Definitely injustice is a huge issue, but I know here at SSAI we promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, also known as DEIA, because we definitely want to provide all sorts of ample opportunities for anyone and everyone, as long as you are, passionate about a particular project, then, you should go for it. So that's wonderful to hear that they are, talking about making sure that there's, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in this climate assessment. And, it's only getting better, with time, which is great. So I'm definitely very excited to see, what additional things they come up with. And, that was very interesting too, how you mentioned that, an anthropologist as well. That just blew my mind. I had no idea that they'd be able to lead the next climate assessment. So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is really amazing.
So, but yeah, congratulations to her. And, we're definitely, very excited to see that in the future. So thank you so much, Libby, for going into further detail about, the importance of integrating human dimensions into ecological research. And, again, collaboration is key. It's important to work as a team because then you can really make an impact and really make a difference. So, Libby, my final question I wanted to ask you was, actually, earlier this year, you received the 2023 Agency Honor Award from NASA for your outstanding contributions to the agency's mission. First of all, I just wanted to congratulate you for that. What an incredible achievement and a high honor. So I wanted to ask you, based on that recognition that you got, what aspects of your work do you believe were most pivotal in earning this recognition? And how do these achievements reflect the broader goals of NASA and SSAI? And additionally, what advice would you offer to young women aspiring to pursue careers in STEM, particularly those who might be inspired by your journey and your accomplishments?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. Yes, it was very exciting to have been nominated and receive that award, and I was really quite honored. I think part of the reason that I received the award is that I and other people that I work with in the Carbon Cycling Ecosystems Office and at SSAI have been more and more, especially over the past few years, really recognizing that that the way that we do science really matters and is really important, and that in order to produce the best science and understanding, we really need to be cognizant and thoughtful and purposeful about every aspect of the way that we do science, whether we're talking about logistics, to the research itself, to writing and co-authorship, to communicating results and collaborating with others. All of that is extremely important to be, as I said, sort of intentional and purposeful about. And I think that that is something that I have been really working hard at, and kind of growing my own expertise in terms of thinking about all of those things, and that putting in structures and processes to support others in scientists or science teams or indigenous knowledge holders or local community people, putting in the structures and facilitating ways that they can actually collaborate and have knowledge exchange and create new knowledge together, I think is really the way that that we will be able to address the climate crisis, and the way that we will be able to just honestly produce better science that is regardless of whatever field that you're talking about. And I think that, I have been able to help in my own way with that, but I also feel very grateful that I think that the science community writ large is really starting to really dig in and wrestle with a lot of these issues. As we were talking, in the last question, and as you mentioned, lots of places now have DEIA initiatives, and I think SSAI is doing really great work and helping to employee resource groups and be able to support all those different activities. And I think that it's important to remember that one, it's the morally right thing to do to do that in terms of being able to, treat everybody with dignity and respect. And that not only is that the morally correct thing to do, but I think that then, as I've mentioned, that is what is going to enable us to be able to produce the best understanding and science that we can. So along those terms, then you asked me, do I have advice to young women? And respectfully, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I think that not that young women don't need advice. I think that many young people do, and there are certainly still, sadly, many societal and even institutional challenges that young women continue to face in terms of, sexism and that kind of thing. I do think that there has been at least a much better sort of public discussion and conversation about this, and that there are more and more support and opportunity for people, whether or not it's young women or other minoritized groups, or people who have not had access to resources, to be able to find mentorship and support and allyship. But I think that we're really at a place now where I think really the onus of the work is now on everybody to not just be allies in terms of cheering people on, but to be accomplices for thinking about the ways that we need to institute change and structurally change the systems that we live and work in to be able to support everybody. And so, I think that there is advice that you could give to, early career people about the importance, say, of, finding good role models or mentors. But again, I think that only takes us so far. And what's really needed now is for everybody else to be able to sort of think about ways that they can really affect meaningful change, not just for individuals, but for everybody.
Yeah, I think, Libby, that was very well said, and I really appreciate your analysis about that. And, for those of you viewers who are currently listening to this podcast episode, I remember, Libby, hearing this great quote that a favorite motivational speaker of mine said. And in terms of, if you wanted to, make change, start by doing one small thing at a time, and, continue to grow from there. And I loved how one of the speakers mentioned that, one of the things that you could do, because, they asked this question, how do I make big change? How do I make a revolutionary idea or something like that? And one of their counselors said, what you can do to start implementing change is to, find someone you don't know at the cafeteria and, just sit by them. And, at first you might think, that's it. That's your big grand analysis, in terms of making change. But the point is that's where it starts, because, it can lead to something, even bigger. One of the famous, civil rights activists like Martin Luther King Jr., he didn't change the world overnight. He built a coalition, over the course of many, many years in terms of promoting civil rights. So it's just, as long as you start small, who knows what that is going to lead to. So I definitely wanted to, comment on that, and I appreciate your expansion on that, Libby. So with that, Libby, like I said, I just wanted to thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk with me today about your role at SSAI, and especially with the NASA Carbon Cycle and Ecosystems Office. You are truly a rock star employee who is really making an impact and a difference globally, and everybody is going to be very fascinated by the continued great work that you and your team do. So please definitely keep us informed about some other great initiatives, advancements, and then also discoveries that are made based on your work. We can't wait to see that and highlight it.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to be able to share with you today.
At SSAI, we believe the best way to obtain knowledge is to pass it on. So again, for those of you who are curious about what SSAI has been up to, please make sure that you follow us on each of our social media platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, and our brand new YouTube channel. Please also check out our website so you can stay up to date on many missions and initiatives like the Above Experiment, the North American Carbon Program, and the U.S. Global Change Research Program that SSAI supports. We have job openings in a variety of different fields, and if you are passionate about science, exploration, and humankind, SSAI is the place for you. In addition, if you want to learn more about the Above Experiment, the North American Carbon Program, and the U.S. Global Change Research Program, please check out the link in the video description below for more information. Also, be sure to engage with us via social media with your questions and comments about this podcast. We want to hear from you. Your voice and ideas matter. Thank you to those of you who have already subscribed to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media already. Please continue to like, share, comment, and subscribe to each of our social media platforms to see all the global STEM initiatives SSAI is involved in. Again, I am your host, Jason Dietrich, SSAI Communications Department member, and thank you all so much for joining. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day, and please be on the lookout for our next podcast episode. Until next time, everyone, cheers.